Hi, and welcome to what promises to be a super interesting panel on a super critical and super sometimes complicated topic. We have Matthias Berninger here, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for Science and Sustainability at Bayer, Eron Bloomgarden, Executive Director of Emergent, and Claire Lund, Global Vice President for Sustainability at GSK. Did I mention that Matthias is from Bayer? I don't know if I mentioned that just now. And we are here to talk about offsets and an intriguing, ambitious, and vast new organization program that is designed to well, let's just dive right in. Eron, do you want to tell us a little bit about the LEAF program? And maybe in the context of what audience members may already know about offsets. We've seen offsets as something offered to get rid of our emissions from personal travel. And we've now seen offsets used to offset the emissions from a shipment of oil. So what are these offsets that we hear so much about? And what are you doing to make them higher quality and safer?
Sure. So that's a big question. Thanks so much. And let me back up and just say, the LEAF Coalition is really designed to address tropical and subtropical deforestation at scale. It recognizes that not one sector has the tools alone to deal with this massive issue. The public sector, the private sector, philanthropy, civil society. So the LEAF Coalition is a public-private partnership designed to unlock massive new flows of capital to really change the incentives on the ground to reverse deforestation. Because we know deforestation contributes roughly 15% to global greenhouse gas emissions. There is no pathway to the goals of the Paris Agreement without massively reversing deforestation. So you mentioned offsets. There's a tremendous thrust now and interest from corporate sector to use high-quality emission reduction credits, importantly, as to address hard-to-abate emissions, supplemental emissions. Right? We believe companies should be doing all they can within their operations, within their own supply chains and value chains to reduce emissions, and then use emission reduction credits as part of that, supplemental approach. So very important. I think that's a really important principle. Our view is that nature, supporting and protecting nature, is really the highest and best use of those efforts. And so the LEAF Coalition now, which we launched on Earth Day at the White House Climate Summit hosted by President Biden, and it's intended to mobilize as a start $1 billion of finance, public-private finance, to provide long-term purchase offtake from tropical forest countries. We only work at the jurisdictional level, right? This is moving from projects to large-scale jurisdictional programs, because we know we've got to massively rethink what we're doing here and massively increase the scale of how we're addressing deforestation. We lose every year an area the size of Greece in tropical and subtropical deforestation. So what we're doing is not enough, right? So we need to do more. We need to not only double, triple our efforts, we need to sort of 10x, 20x our efforts. And that's what we're trying to do with LEAF.
Do you feel like you're in a sort of race against time, not only because of sort of the twin major issues of biodiversity loss and climate change, but also because there's enormous corporate demand for offsets, and we need to make sure they're high quality offsets. And interested for Matthias and Claire to pop in there too, if you have some thoughts.
I'll just start. I'll say absolutely. Look, I mean, especially when you talk about protecting forests, once these ecosystems are lost, they're often lost forever, or at least for a very long time. We hear a lot about reforestation and so-called removals, all good, but very hard to restore the ecosystem function in a primary forest. So we urgently need to protect the forests and nature and ecosystems that we have in place now. The great news is companies around the world, large and you've got two great examples here, really at the vanguard of climate action. There is a tremendous amount of interest, not only to address climate change, but also to see how we can use nature as part of that solution. But there needs to be a safe and appropriate, both from a integrity, quality perspective, but also reputational perspective. And so, we think it's, the LEAF coalition, right, provides, we think, an interesting proposition to come together, not only kind of leading companies, but also a set of donor countries as well. So in the LEAF coalition, we have the United States, UK, Norway. We now have 9 companies. We have additional companies coming on board. We're partnered with civil society, including Environmental Defense Fund, UN Red, and others. So, but love to hear from Matthias and Claire.
Claire, do you want to talk a little? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matthias. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so I was just asking Claire to go ahead, but in any case, from our end, if you looked at the current situation and there's a lot of work to find technological solutions to carbon capture and storage, and apparently they don't work as well as people hoped. And with tropical forests, we have actually functioning carbon capture and storage machines, but we are clearing them at a rapid pace. And I believe that's insane, and that has to stop. So for us, LEAF combines two very important things. It's a measure that will block land use change, and it will help to remove carbon out of the atmosphere. And what I like most about it is the approach that brings together civil society and governments on one hand, and business as a third partner, because this sort of uncommon collaboration is needed to tackle this challenge.
Yeah, I would echo that point. I mean, from our perspective, offsetting, I know it has sort of connotations and a challenge, but it isn't a binary choice. We have to do more, further and faster on climate change and nature loss. So we have to do reductions, absolutely have to be critical in terms of what we're doing from our own site perspective, our own supply chain perspective, to reduce our own emissions and impact on the environment. There is also protecting the environment that is already there. And it's madness if we think we can sort of reach some of these targets and goals without protecting what's already existing, and then also do the removals and the additionality piece as well. So it isn't a binary choice. It is all aspects of systemic change, and frankly, not sequential either. So we have to do all aspects. And for us, really, we looked at 2 goals, so to be climate net zero and net nature positive. 2 goals because they are fully interconnected. So it was more about what are the solutions and the practicalities for really driving towards that goal. And for us, when we looked at the LEAF Coalition, part of it was absolutely how do we protect the tropical rainforests? How do we stop deforestation as one of the threads within that integrated strategy?
One thing that is and it might be worth teasing out is Claire and Matthias, if you why are you doing this at all? Why are Bayer and GSK involved so aggressively in this program? How does it relate to your primary business models?
Yeah, we have 2 reasons. So one reason is that decarbonization is the law of the land. Most governments around the world are on a path of decarbonizing by mid of the century. We have a goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. We want to reduce our emissions in the same path that was agreed on in Paris. So we are on a 1.5 degree emission reduction path. And for that, we need to do both, radically reduce our emissions and find high quality offsetting. And the second reason is very mundane. We are currently experiencing the worst drought in a century in Brazil. Apparently, when you chop down the rainforest, you're not only losing the forest, you're also losing the rain. So it's our belief that apart from stopping land use change, those rainforests are vital for farmers, for example, in Australia, in Sub-Saharan Africa, or in Latin America.
And I think the answer for us is relatively fundamental as well. We're a science-based healthcare company. So protecting and restoring the planet's health is fundamental, protecting and preserving human health. So we have to have it as part of our core purpose, and it's fundamental to driving that core purpose. And a bit similar to Matthias's point, we know we rely on nature. We know we are part of an ecosystem. So we have got to build resilience. We have got to work systemically across boundaries to continue to both drive the purpose of our company, but also the purpose for human health as well. So the connection with climate change, nature loss, and human health is I think very well known and understood, and certainly becoming increasingly understood. So we have to play a strong role in that protection piece as well.
Eron, any thoughts to add there? Like in your observations, working with many other companies from many sectors, is there reasoning why companies need to take this seriously that you'd like to add?
Yeah. So I think what I would just add is, we're talking about voluntary corporate action right now, and voluntary carbon markets have been around for some time, and I've been working in this space for about 20 years, and I think what we've seen is really a very positive evolution over the last really 2 years. Before that, companies were involved in this type of thing more for a marketing or PR boost. I think this is much more systemic now as part of companies' core businesses, precisely because both to do the right thing, but also there's a lot of pressure on companies from not only consumers, but and the market, but also their employees, financial regulators, license to operate. So I think there's a lot of pressure on companies to do this and do this the right way. So I take a lot of heart in that, and I think we have a real opportunity here to use this thrust of interest to really solve one of the big problems that is facing our world, which is deforestation. And then just on the deforestation piece, one thing I want to point out, I think most intuitively people understand, we all learned in grade school that trees breathe in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen, and that's how we breathe, right? So there's that sequestration. But I think intuitively people maybe don't realize this, deforestation is a huge source of emissions. It's about roughly 15% of greenhouse gas emissions. As if we had, these massive coal-burning power plants sitting in the Amazon, and so we can only focus on technical solutions around energy efficiency and renewable energy. We're missing a huge wedge. We've got to immediately stop deforestation. Just wanted to add that point as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. We have a first question from the audience about the structure of the LEAF program itself. And the question is, our understanding is that LEAF offers payment for forest emission reductions of $10 a ton for at least 100 million metric tons of CO2 in the years from the years 2022 to 26. So is that total emissions? Is that per year, or is that total for the 5-year period cumulatively? I would also add, I was curious how you got to $10 a ton as the price for these credits.
I can address that. It's the 100 million tons is total for the 5-year period, but as I said, it really is focused on that being the start. Right? We know that just this sector alone, RED Plus, probably needs 10x that per year. Right? So we probably need $10 billion a year moving into forest protection. In terms of how the $10 was arrived at, it's sort of a combination of where the market has been, where we think the carbon price needs to go, and where what we think can get it done right now. So historically, in the private voluntary market, Red Plus credits have been trading at, say $3 to $5, maybe $6 per ton. On the public side, the World Bank and the Green Climate Fund and others have basically been paying $5 per ton. So I think it was important that we send a signal that this price needs to be significantly higher. So it's more than double, either double or more than double the historic price. So that felt right. That felt like the right signal to send. But we know that carbon prices need to go much higher if we're going to stay within the Paris Agreement. They need to be over 30, in fact, probably closer to 100 over the next several years. So the way that LEAF is structured is what's offered to the jurisdictions is a combination of $10 fixed and through the public donor participation, a $10 floor price. So there is some, for jurisdictions, there would be some benefit if prices go up over time.
Got it. The next question is for Claire and Matthias, and I think to asking for a little bit more specificity on a couple things you've already hinted at, and that's just how you intend to use the emission reductions. What's the interplay between participation in the LEAF program and your own carbon cutting efforts, and also how do you have say in which jurisdictions the actual credits you're buying come from, and visibility into what the sort of national goals and the national carbon accounting of those countries are? Are those considerations that you take into account, or LEAF in general?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that first. I mean, from a GSK perspective, we're actually, I suppose, planning to use the LEAF Coalition as part of the net nature positive agenda for us. So this is around protecting and restoring biodiversity. So we weren't actually intending to use the carbon emission aspect against our carbon commitments. We're following the science-based targets net zero plan and pathway for that, again, against the 1.5 degree pathway. So actually, we were really looking at how can this anchor into the protection of tropical rainforests, of biodiversity, and actually the deforestation agenda. In terms of the second part about, do we get to choose jurisdictions or how does that work? That's exactly why we're part of this coalition at the moment, is to be able to understand what does that look like? How's that going to work? This, I think, is a fundamental shift. This is a systemic shift in what has happened in the past. And we need to go through that exploring phase of understanding how it could work credibly, at scale, with the right quality, with the right sort of social aspects as well in terms of what we're driving towards here. So I think the answer to that second one is we will wait and see as the sort of the program and projects progress, and we'll sort of take that action as it comes through. So I think this is an exploratory territory we're going into at a global scale. So that second part, I think, will come through shortly.
For us, the question of where actually those emissions are accounted is a big one as well. Like Claire has mentioned, a precondition to join LEAF is that you commit to do everything you can to reduce your carbon emissions within the 1.5 degree pathway. I also think that it's important that companies think about internal carbon prices. In the case of Bayer, it's €100 per ton that we internally account for when we look at our carbon emissions to really radically reduce our own footprint. The best carbon is the carbon that's not emitted. The question where those kind of LEAF credits are allocated is, of course, a big one. It kept COP in Madrid very, very busy. In our case, we are in a very comfortable situation because we have a long tradition in Brazil, quite a huge carbon footprint in Brazil, even in countries like Costa Rica, where we plan new investments and will announce them this year. We have enough domestic emissions. So for us, those emission reductions really don't need to cross borders. They can be accounted in the countries. And of course, that's the best of both worlds, that we are able to reduce our emissions in the countries where we protect nature, in this case, tropical forests.
Just a quick follow-up, maybe for Claire, on the nature-based use of the program. Is it like one reason why net zero has sort of just rode into town the last few years is it's quite simple, right? We need to get to net zero emissions by 2050, and everyone needs to cut their carbon. But is there a goal as certainly maybe not as simple, but simpler than deforestation? Like, what's the top goal for deforestation that you are counting these credits against?
I think that's a brilliant question. And I think that the challenge is the reason net zero has sort of, I guess, landed is it's relatively straightforward. It's one metric to measure, which is carbon. When you start to move into the nature agenda, there is no one metric. It's a range of biodiversity, it's a range of water, it's a range of water quality. So I think the challenge actually is not having a standardized metric to be able to bank it against is one of the challenges. But frankly, we do know, and I think it's fairly logical, and it's coming through from the Convention of Biological Diversity, it's coming through from sort of the other sort of actors as well. Protection of tropical rainforests is the right thing to do. So whether that's hectares of land or whether that's a species diversity impact, those are exactly the areas we now want to really drive in to understand the impact, understand how we can sort of make sure that where we are investing and supporting programs and projects, that impact and that measurable quality is there as well. And frankly, the problem is it's not just one solution, as I keep saying. It's not just a climate change carbon piece. It is biodiversity, it is water, it is ecosystems. It is a much broader spectrum of that. So where you bank it against is almost the wrong question. It's almost what are we driving? And it's reductions, it's protection, and it's additionality and removals. That's the right approach, I believe.
Great. Thank you for that. Next question from the audience is about the criteria that companies need to meet to join LEAF. Eron, do you have thoughts on that? And I'm also curious about what are companies failing to do, if they are not meeting those criteria? Like, what do you tell them they need to do?
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is such an important question, and I think one of the key developments, I think, around LEAF. And maybe just to back up, I think Claire mentioned that offsets over the last, I've been involved in offsets, carbon offsets and emission reduction credits for the last 20 years. And Claire mentioned there has been, dogged by some controversy from time to time. And I think we were very deliberate in designing LEAF to try to address a lot of these issues that have come, whether they're technical issues like additionality and leakage or credibility issues. And this is a really key piece around the criteria for companies. So I think this is, one of the first times, at least, that not only are there robust criteria on the suppliers, in other words, that there has to be third-party verified, there's a really tight set of criteria for the jurisdictions to supply credits into LEAF. Similarly, in order for corporates to participate, there's criteria, and largely this is around ensuring that companies are doing all that they can do to reduce their own emissions within their own operations and with their own in their own value chains. And so there's 5. Which one is publicly committing to science-based targets, could be an SBTi or equivalent. It is publicly committing to mid-century net zero targets across all 3 scopes. Join the UN Race to Zero is number 3. Number 4 is report greenhouse gas emissions publicly following the GHG protocols. And the 5th is publicly and transparently report on the use of carbon credits. So those are the 5 key pieces.
Great, thank you. And have you had to turn people away who were interested in LEAF because they weren't satisfying those?
No, we have actually more than one. There, one or two or a few of these may not have been met by some companies. They may be in the process, and so saying, well, come back when you've publicly committed and you've got a plan. There are some industries that. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
I didn't want to cut you off. We're getting a lot of interest in the next question, but why don't you go ahead and finish up? Sorry about that.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, there are there aren't science-based target guidelines for every sector, and so some sectors are waiting for that guidance.
When we talk about these things in New York, London, Paris, Beijing, Tokyo, I'm leaving out hundreds of major world cities here, but we talk about companies and countries and jurisdictions, and not often enough do we explicitly talk about the local communities who live in the places that require protection from deforestation. Like, what is LEAF doing to and the companies to gain the confidence of communities who are most directly affected by this work?
I mean, that's probably one of the biggest advantages that I see in LEAF. It is that the communities that often willingly also participate in the smaller projects we have engaged in so far have better protection. In other words, they participate in the process with the help of the three governments that were mentioned at the beginning, Norway, the UK, and the US. There is also much more support in their conflicts and struggles with the countries they are living in. So in other words, those communities play a key role. Forest protection happens on local level. Most often, forest protection is not a problem for those local communities because they live in those forests. Most often it's external forces that kind of try to use that land for different purposes. And therefore, LEAF is not only looking at trees, it's very much focused on people as well.
Any other thoughts on how to make sure communities are equal partners in all this?
Yeah, so I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if it was made clear enough. LEAF is a coalition. It's a group of companies and governments coming together. There's not an organization called LEAF. And so just to be clear, I'm the executive director of a group called Emergent. We're a nonprofit, and so we're mission aligned, focused on maximizing environmental impact. And we coordinate and act as a transaction platform for LEAF. So what we're doing also is we've got a very proactive engagement process and outreach process to communicate what is LEAF, to indigenous and local communities. We're partnering with civil society, both international civil society and local civil society, NGOs and indigenous groups on the ground. In this proposal, so the mechanism for LEAF is a call for proposals that we put out to tropical and subtropical forest countries. And there is robust criteria in there also around how IPLCs, indigenous populations and local communities are engaged, how there's transparency, and it absolutely minimum has to meet the international safeguards and requirements at the UNFCCC level, Cancun safeguards and others. So very much focused on this.